Our first speaker will be Brigadier General retired Gary Proffitt. Gary was the former Deputy Chief of the Army Reserve. He is Senior Director of Military Programs at Walmart, and will bring the perspective of some of those big companies from the inside look at how they assist in the transition from back to the workforce. Gary is from bachelor's from Eastern Michigan University, an MBA from the University of Michigan, and a Master's of Science from the National Security from the Naval War College. Our second speaker will be Captain Retired Dawn Halfaker. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Halfaker and Associates. As such, excuse me, she assists in radically changing the business environment and the thought processes for hiring veterans. She's a military police officer and served previously, in Operation Iraqi Freedom, where she served in Baghdad, earning a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star for her service. She's worked with Congress in serving as a military liaison for the House Armed Services Committee. She has a Bachelor's of Science from the United States Military Academy at West Point and a Master of Arts in Security Studies from Georgetown. Our third presenter will be William Offutt. He serves as the Vice President of Government Relations for Victory Media, who publishes GI Jobs and Military Spouse magazine. And William Offutt is also a Vietnam vet who served at the same time I was in Chulai, so we may have crossed paths from time to time. Our final speaker for this morning's panel will be Maureen Casey. She's the Executive Director on Military and Veterans Affairs for Morgan Chase. She co-leads the firm's efforts to develop and implement a comprehensive, firm-wide strategy to assist transitioning service members. She worked previously for Giuliani Associates and was a principal in the Deputy Commission for Policy and Planning in New York City. Interestingly enough, some of her work was associated with the DNA identification of people at the World Trade Center. She received her JD from SUNY Buffalo and a School of Law and bachelor's from the State College at Brockport. Please welcome our next panel. Thank you.
Good morning. I am in fact Gary Proffitt, and thanks so much, Donna. It's a great delight for me to be here for the second year as a representative of Walmart, and as we continue to kind of count the number of veterans and military families represented at Walmart, we expect that I'm here representing somewhere north of 150,000 people, and I'm grateful for that, but I'm also grateful for the opportunity to be here with you today. Let me be quite clear. We think that it's our civic and social responsibility to lead as both the largest private employer of veterans and military families. But it's also important for everyone to know that we think it's all about business outcomes at the end. This represents the largest and arguably most diverse, talent-rich pool in the world, and so we think it's good for our business first and foremost. Second, as part of the networking session that I guess follows the symposium, we're delighted to have some of our important partners here. You heard from one of them earlier in the Q&A session from Syracuse University and the Institute for Veterans and Military Families. but there are others here also, and I'd certainly encourage you to reach out and talk with them, because they do very important work in partnership with us to address other unmet needs for veterans and military families, some of which you addressed a little bit in the earlier panel. And let me just, going back to that panel, just mention from your focus with respect to entrepreneurship and small business was associated a bit, I think, with the private sector in your Q&A. But we're in the process of understanding better at Walmart how many veteran-owned businesses and disabled veteran-owned businesses and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses are a part of our supply chain. And I would argue that in the private sector, that's where the multiplier effect really comes. It's not in the public sector. And we think we can advantage our work there as well. The principal challenge we face, you talked about a little bit earlier, and in part, it's both sides of the equation are true. We must do a great deal more to empower our recruiters and hiring managers to better understand and to bridge the communications gap from their side to understand the value of a veteran, if you will, or understand the value of a military spouse. But I would also tell you that we think that that transition from the military ought to begin at recruitment or commissioning. Almost everyone is going to go on to a second career of some sort. And the earlier that networking can begin so that those young people can begin to build and offer their own personal brand, I think will advantage them, and I think will actually advantage the value that people that are considering military service will find in it, because there will be a commitment on the backside of the life cycle. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Gary.
Great. Well, I can't agree with Gary more in some of the remarks he said about corporate America. And I'll kind of get into some of my thoughts around that. But I'm definitely just wanted to say thank you for having me. It's obviously an honor and a pleasure to be here and be a part of this kind of very important discussion. As it was brought up in the introduction, my name's Captain Retired Dawn Halfacre. I think I kind of come at this from 3, maybe even 4 different perspectives. As a wounded warrior, I'll talk a little bit about my perspective with that, and then as a leader in the nonprofit community, I'm the president of the board of directors of the Wounded Warrior Project, where we have a program called Warriors to Work, where we're partnering with a lot of these big corporations to get our warriors linked up with jobs. And as a business owner, I started my own company in the national security space, and we've got about 175 employees. So I'm a small business owner as well, hiring veterans, hiring women veterans. And then also I am a female veteran, which I think also has, as it was brought up in some of the Q&A, some unique aspects just to this discussion. So real quickly, I'll just kind of run through a few thoughts in those areas. I think as a transitioning warrior, the biggest thing that I faced was just not really knowing where to turn when I was facing transition. I mean, the last thing I remember from being in Iraq, I was on a patrol, got hit with a rocket-propelled grenade on that patrol, and then was medevaced out immediately. The next thing I knew, I woke up at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, coming out of a coma after 2 weeks, and was basically told, I lost my right arm, and that my career as an officer was over. So that was a lot to take in, and I was 24 years old at the time when that happened. And so all I knew was really the military and that life. So having to start thinking about transitioning and what I was going to do and what, how my skills translated, I really didn't know where to start. And I almost felt like it was kind of this new form of combat that I hadn't been trained for. It was brought up earlier that, the military, the one thing they don't train you on is how to find a job, understandably, but I do think that a lot of work needs to be done in that area. And it's gotten a lot better. I transitioned back in 2005, and I think that there's a lot more out there. But again, I think the biggest thing, the 2 biggest things that I really faced was just not really knowing where to start in terms of finding the resources that are out there to look for the jobs, and then really when I was going on interviews and things like that, I just didn't really feel like I fit within the culture of a lot of organizations. And I think, again, there's been great strides, but I think the two biggest things are, again, how to find the resources, connecting veterans with the resources, and then also, making sure that, corporations or even in the public sector that we're really making an effort within our culture to understand what it is that military people seek when they make transition. I mean, I was really felt like I lost my sense of purpose, and that's what I was looking for again, and I just wanted to find that. I think as a kind of on the nonprofit side, with our Warriors to Work program, there's really three, you kind of break it down to three simple phases, and having been through the transition and then also being able to now help other wounded warriors make the transition, it's really, about three things for them. It's connecting them with the opportunities that are out there, and then it's preparing them and helping them obtain those opportunities, and educating them about the opportunities, because a lot of us, if you're an infantryman coming off the battlefield and you're 21 years old, you probably don't know a lot about corporate America and how those skills translate. So figuring out what's out there, and then also, keeping the job. And that's one thing that I think that's unique with our organization that not all organizations are really focused on, is kind of the long term of that transition, and really saying, okay, well, yeah, we've got you the job, but how long are you in that job for? And then really, what's your earning potential over the course of your life, and how are we really helping our veterans and empowering them economically to really be productive members of society? So those are kind of the three phases, and again, I just think that finding the right opportunities and ensuring that warriors and veterans can stay in those jobs is very important. From a business perspective, I think, that's been really interesting for me, because, now looking to hire military people and really create an organization that culturally fits for transitioning military, along with a lot of other employees and folks from different walks of life, it is challenging. And it's really, I think, the onus is on corporations, on companies, on corporate America to really go out and I don't want to steal any thunder, but do what the Walmarts and the JP Morgans are doing, and really create a concerted effort, put the resources behind it, create a program, and go and do outreach, and really go out and say, I'm going to go find the veterans, and then I'm going to show them, why my organization is a potential fit for them, and really help them translate those skills and make the effort, and then go partner with some of these nonprofits that are also focused around helping the military and service members and wounded warriors all just sort of prepare for that transition.
Great comments, Don.
Great. So that's really all I have. So and then as a female, I just think that I think a lot of times people look at me and they wonder, there's a policy that says women aren't in combat, and they look at me kind of funny and they don't really understand what to make of that. And so I think that's just kind of the other angle of the discussion is, obviously each cohort of veterans are also unique within the bigger veteran population. And so just some focus and some effort specifically to women, I think, is important, because we handle this transition differently and we face different challenges. So thank you so much.
Outstanding.
Good morning. As the General mentioned, belatedly, we found out we both served in July together, and while I never needed medical attention, on occasion I would see an Army nurse, and she would always have a smile on her face, and to me that was priceless. So from a fellow Vietnam veteran, I want to thank those who were in Vietnam and served in Vietnam Air for your service. It always meant a lot to us. I'd like to just touch on about 4 areas, some of which have been talked about, but just kind of focus on them to begin with, because there are critical steps in the employment process, and for a veteran seeking employment, these are kind of interesting steps, but particularly for female veterans. Number one is, we've talked about it a little bit here, but the emphasis on a resume. I mean, yes, resumes are very important, but reading a veteran's resume is a little more difficult, as the General pointed out earlier, General Cody pointed out. It's not necessarily what's on the resume, it's the person who served and what he did and the values that the person has. But the problem is that many people today, there are automatic tracking systems for major corporations, and this doesn't come through on a tracking system because it doesn't match the specific requirements of the job. So it's a constant struggle to work with the veteran's resume. And yes, they learn how to write a resume in ACAP or TAP, but again, it's not necessarily something that comes secondhand to someone in that. Secondly is the role of the human resources in the recruiting process for corporations. We talk about major corporations here. Yes, small businesses do have a better entree into a veteran, but we have to understand that the hiring manager is not the recruiting manager, and so trying to get the recruiting manager to understand and read a veteran's resume is also a very critical process. And the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, is beginning to address this problem, working with their HR managers to understand the value of a veteran and what it means to have a veteran in their workforce. But it's been an evolutionary process, not a revolutionary process. And so it's been very difficult to get corporations, get people to understand, yes, we have the top 100 corporations and GI jobs whom we recognize for their service and what they've done, but it hasn't really translated into all of corporate America, which is more difficult. The third thing is more than ever, I think women veterans need a mentor, and I haven't heard anybody talk about the mentoring process. But it's very important that we think more along these lines. And as we talked about women entrepreneurs, we should really think about how we can find mentors for them. Right now, there are over 2 million OEF veterans in the workforce. About 16 or 17% are women. But the interesting thing is that almost 20% of them are not in the workforce. So, you know, if there was a mentoring process in there, and of course this is not something that's going to take place in the ACAP process, it's not something that's going to take place in TAP, but it's something that needs, I think, to be addressed to help women veterans to recognize their skills, recognize who they are, and to understand the value of what they have in offering the workforce. And the last area I want to talk about is licensing and certification. This to me and since I was at the Department of Labor with my good friend Ron Drock, this has always been what I call the holy grail of transition, because a veteran earns a skill in the military. I mean, not everybody's an 11 Bravo. But however, making that transition into the civilian workforce with their military skills has always been a very difficult process, and getting the licensing and certification for that. And I talked, for example, about the 68 whiskey, but I have to say that progress is on the horizon. The Department of Defense is doing a fabulous job in going out to state legislatures and getting them to recognize that somebody coming out of the military with an MOS should be able to have immediate licensing and certification rather than go through the process of a long transition. And they're getting state legislatures to change their laws so that they'll look at and recognize what happens when a veteran does come out. I point out, for example, the 68 whiskey. In last fiscal year, and I'll leave you with this last fiscal year, the Army issued 171,000 DD-214s. Of that 171,000, at some point in fiscal year 2011, 101,000 collected unemployment insurance. Now, 15% of those were 11 Bravos. The number 3 was 68 whiskey. Over 3,000 68 whiskeys collected unemployment insurance, and we have a shortage of people in health care. So there is an evolutionary process again to help the veteran make the transition. But for those who have served, the 2 million have already gone ahead of us, ahead of these folks. It's a difficult transition process. So these are issues that they're in the forefront, and they're coming ahead, and there are people out there trying to address them. And thank you.
Great.
Thank you. As Cindy Pritchard said, the Army is a learning organization, and I think that J.P. Morgan Chase is too. And over the course of the last year, we have really tried to build a comprehensive program across all of our lines of business, focused primarily on jobs, homeownership, education, and training. I think what makes our program unique, and we have had the benefit of the expertise of the Walmarts, the Prudentials, the General Electrics out there who have been doing this for quite some time, and they've been willing to share what they've learned to make us better. So we appreciate that. We have really been driven by the top of our organization. Jamie Dimon, our CEO, and Frank Bisignano, our Chief Administrative Officer, are intimately involved in our efforts, and I always say that can be a very good thing, and it also can be a very challenging thing. But for us, it's a good thing because they have dedicated the resources to allow us to build a program. We have 10 people working full-time on communications, HR, philanthropy, in addition to the program management and development that I and my colleague Nate Herman do. We're also data-driven in our efforts. I think that what we've heard a lot about this morning is that we really need to understand the variables and drivers, what are the unique challenges that transitioning service members and veterans bring to the table, and how can we as employers assist them in making that transition. So we have really focused on each of our initiatives, building it around the data, understanding those variables and drivers. And as you heard mentioned a couple of times here, Cindy Pritchard is a member of our External Advisory Council. We believe that it is very important for us to get the input of the experts as we develop these programs, so we have a panel of all former military leaders that advise us on our day-to-day activities. I'm going to focus primarily on jobs in terms of the initiatives that we're talking about, and I think that one of the things that I heard from some of the folks that we've talked to here is that many of the issues and how transitioning service members and veterans are struggling with that transition is if they only had a job, so many of the other things that they could do or some of the other challenges that they face would be a bit easier. So last year our organization started the 100,000 Jobs mission. And we formed a coalition at that time with 10 companies, and we've committed to hiring 100,000 veterans over the next 10 years. We're now up to 37 companies. At the end of 2001, the 20 companies reporting it hired 6,600 veterans. Our numbers we're up to 37 companies now, as I said. We're looking at diversity of industry, diversity of geography. We have everything from, I was just going to say, another one of the major box stores, but I won't mention the name given that I'm sitting up here with Gary. Time Warner, IBM, Cisco, Iron Mountain, 7-Eleven. And I think one of the key things that is coming out of that coalition of companies is that we're all collectively willing to share best practices. This is, as has been mentioned, corporate America is learning how we do this better. And so the fact that we come together once every couple of months to share best practices, here's what's working for us, this might be helpful for you. And I think the other thing that we're doing in addition to best practices is that we're sharing military talent. Not everybody wants to come to work at a major global financial institution, but we know that there's talent out there, and how do we share that amongst our coalition partners? We've also, in addition to participating in the Hire Hero U.S. Chamber job fairs, we're also looking at a new model of targeted hiring events where we look specifically at the job opportunities that we have, that our coalition partners have, and really assess what the functional job skills are of those positions that we have available. And we're looking at, we just conducted a targeted hiring event in Bethesda, Maryland a couple of weeks ago, and we did something unique, which is we asked transitioning service members and veterans to submit their resumes in advance. We looked at those resumes, assessed those functional job skills, and then targeted them when they came to those hiring events. And there were over 70 job offers that were made at that hiring event 2 weeks ago. So I think that we're looking to see, again, we're a learning organization, how do we do better? I think the other thing that we're doing is that we're looking internally in terms of how we hire. And we are accepting resumes, by the way. But we now have a dedicated team of military recruiters. Most of the team has military experience, or they've recruited in the military space. We believe that that helps. Every military candidate that applies for a job gets a personal call back from us within 5 days. We believe that that's important, and we've talked a lot about the fit. Having an opportunity to speak to that military candidate, see if the jobs that they're applying for is the right fit, and how can we make their experience within our firm a good one as they're applying for their jobs. And I think the other thing, too, that we've heard talk about is we as employers have a responsibility to understand the military talent, in addition to developing training programs for the military that are transitioning into our organization. So we've developed 2 training programs, one for our recruiters and hiring managers, sort of a military 101. Here's the difference between active duty, guard, reserve. the different branches of government, how to understand those military resumes and the experiences that come to the table. And we've also developed a training program for the transitioning military members. How do you understand the corporate battle space? So I think, again, we're learning, too, from all of you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to learn more, and look forward to the opportunity to engage during the networking session. Thanks.
Well, great comments all. I'd like to summarize a little bit of what I heard and then open the floor to a few questions. We heard from big companies and small companies. We heard from big companies who are reorganizing their efforts within the company to better understand the military. So does that mean that we're doing a better job? I think we probably are at educating, but as Gary points out, it's business. And they're recognizing that it is good business to hire military. The question is why? General Cody talked about the values, and I think what Dawn spoke of, when she left the military, when she woke up, she lost her sense of purpose. And it reminds me that when we are in uniform, it isn't a job. We're not looking for a job. It isn't work. It's who we are, not what we do. That's really different than the majority of jobs out there. Many people go to a job because it's what you have to do in order to get money to be what you want to be. In the military, you are what you want to be. And it's a very, very different perspective, something that I don't think is shared with many people in the civilian environment. So we do have to learn, how do we translate our values? How do we translate this ethos that we are something more than just going to work? We put our lives on the line. We give up a lot to be there. And sometimes we expect that other people recognize that, and they don't always recognize it. So we've got some work to do on both sides, both on the corporate business side. Small businesses are not without challenges when you hire military, especially in the Guard and Reserve, who might leave and take your brain trust of your organization with them. So a lot of issues. This panel is called Back to Work, and I would offer that what I heard here was more than just back to work.